You've probably noticed that some people seem to change their lives effortlessly, while others struggle for years to make even small adjustments. The difference isn't willpower. It's not discipline or motivation, or any of those things we typically blame ourselves for lacking. The difference is that some people, whether they realize it or not, are working with their brain's natural systems instead of fighting against them. And once you understand how those systems actually operate, behavior change stops feeling like a constant battle. Let's start with the basic architecture. Deep in your brain, beneath all the conscious thinking, sits a structure called the basal ganglia. This is your habit engine. Its job is to take behaviors you repeat frequently and convert them into automatic routines that run without your awareness. When you first learned to tie your shoes or drive a car, every step required intense focus. Your prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of your brain, was burning through energy managing all those tiny decisions. But after enough repetitions, the basal ganglia compress the entire sequence into a single chunk. Now you can tie your shoes while planning your day. You can drive familiar routes and barely remember the journey. This is incredibly efficient, but it creates a problem. Once a behavior becomes automatic, it's encoded as a neural program that runs whenever the right trigger appears. The basal ganglia doesn't evaluate whether the habit is good for you. It just detects the pattern and executes it. This is why trying to change habits through willpower alone is so exhausting. You're asking your prefrontal cortex to manually override an automatic system every single time the habit wants to run. That works for a while, but willpower is a limited resource. Eventually, you get tired, stressed, or distracted, and the automatic program reasserts itself. The solution is to work with the basal ganglia instead of against it. Habits form through a simple loop. A cue triggers a routine, and the routine delivers a reward. If you repeat this loop consistently, the behavior becomes automatic. The cue might be a time of day, a location, an emotional state, or even the completion of another action. The routine is the behavior itself. The reward is whatever your brain registers as positive, and it doesn't have to be objectively good. It just has to feel rewarding in the moment. Here's where it gets interesting. Your brain learns habits through dopamine, the neurotransmitter that tags experiences as worth repeating. When you do something and get a reward, dopamine strengthens the neural connections between the cue and the behavior. But as the habit solidifies, something shifts. The dopamine response moves from the reward itself to the cue that predicts the reward. Your brain starts craving the behavior before you even perform it. This is why habitual behaviors can feel almost compulsive. You're not responding to the reward anymore. You're responding to the anticipation. So how do you actually use this? First, stop thinking about goals and start thinking about systems. Don't focus on losing 20 pounds. Focus on becoming someone who makes healthy food choices. Don't aim to write a novel. Aim to become someone who writes daily. The identity shift matters because behaviors that align with your self-concept require less effort to maintain. When exercise is something you make yourself do, it depletes willpower. When exercise is something you do because you're a person who exercises, it's just what you do. But you can't simply declare a new identity. Identity forms through evidence. Every time you perform a behavior, you're casting a vote for the type of person you're becoming. One workout doesn't make you an athlete, but it's one vote for that identity. 50 workouts is 50 votes. Eventually the votes accumulate and the identity becomes real. This is why starting small is so powerful. You don't need dramatic action. You need consistent evidence. The environment you create determines which behaviors feel easy and which feel hard. Your brain is constantly calculating effort versus reward. If healthy food is washed, cut, and visible on the counter, eating it requires almost no effort. If it's buried in the back of the fridge, the effort increases. That small difference in friction is often enough to determine what you actually do. This is choice architecture. You're not changing what you're capable of, you're changing what's convenient. The same principle works in reverse. If you want to stop a behavior, add friction. Delete the apps. Put the snacks on a high shelf. Make the unwanted behavior require extra steps. Each step is a moment where the automatic sequence can be interrupted. You're not relying on willpower in the moment. You're making a decision once, in advance, that changes the conditions every time the habit tries to activate. Context is more powerful than you probably realize. Your habits are bound to the environments where you practice them. When you walk into your kitchen, your hippocampus retrieves all the behaviors you typically perform there. The location itself becomes a cue. This is why people often find it easier to start new habits when they move to a new home or start a new job. The old environmental cues aren't present, so the old automatic behaviors don't get triggered as strongly. You don't need to move to leverage this, though. Small changes to your existing environment can disrupt old cues and create new ones. One of the most practical techniques is called implementation intentions. Instead of vague goals, you create specific if-then plans. If it's 7 a.m. and I'm in my bedroom, then I will put on my running shoes. If I finish lunch, then I will immediately go for a 10-minute walk. The precision matters because you're programming a trigger your brain watches for that specific situation. And when it occurs, the behavior unfolds automatically. You're not deliberating in the moment. The decision was made in advance. You can stack new habits onto existing ones. After I pour my coffee, I'll write for 5 minutes. After I brush my teeth, I'll floss. The existing habit serves as a reliable anchor because it's already automatic. You're using behavioral momentum. Once you've initiated one action, continuing with a related action is easier than starting from rest. Over time, the entire sequence gets encoded as a single unit. Here's something most people don't consider. The immediate rewards matter more than the long-term benefits when you're establishing a habit. Your brain's reward system responds to instant feedback, not to abstract future payoffs. Exercise makes you healthier eventually, but that's too distant to drive habit formation. What drives it is the immediate feeling of accomplishment, the endorphin release, the sense of having followed through. This is why temptation bundling works. You pair the beneficial behavior with something immediately pleasurable. You only listen to your favorite podcast while exercising. The podcast becomes the instant reward, which strengthens the habit loop, even though the health benefits are still months away. When you're trying to stop a behavior, pure suppression rarely works. Your brain is better at switching between actions than at completely inhibiting them. If you try to just not check your phone, you're maintaining constant inhibition, which is exhausting. But if you replace phone checking with a different behavior, taking 3 deep breaths, stepping outside for a moment, you're redirecting the impulse rather than fighting it. The replacement gives your brain something to do, which relieves the motivational pressure without requiring sustainable self-control. Social forces shape your behavior more than you probably realize. Your brain is constantly observing what the people around you do and using that information to calibrate what's normal. When everyone around you exercises regularly, exercise stops feeling like a special achievement and starts feeling like just what people do. The behavior gets normalized. This is social contagion, and you can use it deliberately by surrounding yourself with people who already practice the habits you want to adopt. You're not copying them consciously. You're allowing their behavior to reset your baseline for what feels typical. One last thing about maintaining habits over time. When you miss a day, the habit doesn't disappear. The neural pathway is still there. It just weakens slightly. The danger isn't the single lapse. It's the story you tell yourself about the lapse. If you interpret it as evidence that you can't maintain the behavior, you might give up entirely. But if you interpret it as a temporary deviation from a pattern you're still committed to, you'll resume quickly. Speed of resumption is what matters. A 1-day gap is meaningless. A 1-week gap requires effort to overcome. A 1-month gap can feel like starting over. The habits you've already eliminated don't vanish either. They go dormant. The pathways remain encoded, waiting for the right conditions to reactivate. This is why stress, travel, or major life changes can bring back old behaviors you thought you'd conquered. You haven't lost your progress. You've temporarily lost the cognitive capacity to override the old pattern. Recognizing this removes some of the sting when it happens. You're not starting from zero. You're reactivating something that was merely suppressed. All of this suggests a different way of thinking about behavior change. It's not about summoning enough willpower to force yourself into action. It's about understanding the machinery that generates behavior and adjusting the inputs. You change the cues, you modify the environment, you attach new behaviors to existing anchors. You find immediate rewards, you leverage social context, you build identity through accumulated evidence. None of this requires you to become a different person. It just requires you to work with the person you already are, with the brain you already have, in ways that make the desired behaviors feel natural rather than forced. The reason this works when other approaches fail is simple. You're not fighting your own neurology. You're using it. The basal ganglia wants to automate behaviors. Let it automate the ones you actually want. The dopamine system wants immediate rewards. Give it rewards that serve your goals. The hippocampus wants to link behaviors to contexts. Create contexts that support the behaviors you're building. Your brain isn't the obstacle, it's the tool. And once you learn to use it properly, changing your habits stops being a matter of discipline and becomes a matter of design. Thank you for listening. If you found this useful, there's a longer version that goes deeper into each of these mechanisms, available whenever you want to explore further. But the core insight is this: willpower fails not because you're weak, but because you're using the wrong tool for the job. Start working with your brain's automatic systems instead of against them, and you'll find that change is not only possible, but surprisingly sustainable.